Introduction. If you like caption, turn on CCI Voice, How to Draft T-Shirt Pattern with subtitle. Dear all viewers, this time I greet all those who have seen and heard me from the country and abroad. I'll share some idea for people from my experience if anyone finds it useful. I have brought a new video, How to Make or Draft a T-Shirt. Hey, welcome to this series of videos about how to make T-shirt pattern step by step. Explain with. So watch this video until end. Let's go work it. You're going to be needing your which is measurements given, buyer size L by 42, neck full measurement 16 inch, across shoulder to shoulder, 18 inch, neck width point to point 6 inch, back neck depth 1/4 inch less from 1 inch, front neck 3 and 1/4 inch shoulder slope, 1 3/4 inch, across back width 17 inch, across front width 16 inch, chest or bust, full around at armhole 42 inch, seat, bottom, hem width, full around 42 inch T, shirt length, from HPS, 28 inch, armhole full around measurement 20 1/2 inch, sleeve length from shoulder 0.9 inch, width, full around 17 inch sleeve, opening 14 inch, neck rib height 1. We are going to be starting with the back bodies. First we are take a paperboard and make fold, get the center back. Let's go start draw and explain step by step. Starting with the neckline. And as you can see, I've created half across shoulder add 0.5 inch seam allowance mark. And created shoulder slope, divide the across shoulder measurements by 10 down from the shoulder point and mark. And as you can see, I've created the half back neck width, and I use 3 inch from recorded subtract 0.38 inch for seam margin. And as you can see, I've created back neck depth. Measure down from the neck point and mark the curve line. Use neck shape scale as shown. And as you can see, I've created the across back and across front placement from HPS. Men high point shoulder, minimum 5 inch below high point shoulder, this across front and across back baseline. And as you can see, I've created the across back width, half across back measurement. Add 0.5 inch seam allowance. And as you can see, I've created the armhole depth. From A to 1/4 of bust and mark point, this armhole depth. And as you can see, I've created the bust or chest. Measure from armhole depth point to 1/4 of bust or chest adds 0.38 inch seam allowance and mark point, plus 0.25 inch for shrinkage, and mark point this 1/4 bust. And as you can see, I've created the armhole shape. Square from across back baseline to bust baseline. Draw 1 inch diagonal line. Draw, armhole, curve line. Use, armhole, shape, scale from bust and armhole base point, touching across back baseline and joint to shoulder point. This back, armhole curve, seam line. And as you can see, I've created the length measurements, 0.38 inch mark, seam margin, and measure from HPS to bottom. Hem add 0.5 inch for shrinkage and add an inch hem folding. And as you can see, I've created the bottom hem baseline. Square out from long end. And as you can see, I've created the hip or bottom width. 1/4 of bottom, hem width adds 0.38 inch seam allowance. And as you can see, I've created the side seam line. Square from bottom, hem point, touching waist baseline, joint to armhole, base point, this side seam line. And as you can see, I've created the shoulder forward divide the neck measurements by 10. Draw shoulder line as angle from neck, HPS, to shoulder end point as shown. Completing the back pattern, cut the pattern from paperboard. And as you can see, I've created the seam allowance. Mark on seam, and 1 inch at bottom hem. Pattern 0.38 inch side seam, armhole seam, shoulder seam, and neck seam. Let's finish. Thank for watching, like, share. Figure 2, and as you can see, I've created the front part. And as you can see, I've created the front part, front neck width. I use measure from recorded 3 inch, 0.38 inch. Subtract and mark point. Or use formula full neck measurement divide by 5 use, subtract 0.38 inch for the seam margin this front neck width. Draw 1 inch diagonal line. Draw front curve neckline. Seam allowance mark as work. And as you can see, I've created the subtract shoulder forward from front shoulder line. And as you can see, I've created the subtract shoulder forward from front shoulder line. And as you can see, I've created the subtract shoulder forward from front shoulder. And as you can see, I've created across front width. Get across front width measurement from recorded divide by 2 and measure from center front to across front end, plus 0.25 inch for shrinkage, 0.38 inch seam allowed. And as you can see, I've created the front armhole shape. Draw front armhole shape. Use armhole scale from armhole and chest base point, touching across front joint to shoulder point. This front armhole. We are draw the front grain line. And as you can see, I've created the seam allowance. Mark on pattern, 0. Shoulder seam, armhole seam. We are draw the back grain line. Completing t-shirt back and front pattern, next coming sleeve pattern making, and subscribes for the next video. And as you can see, I've created the make fold paper board for the get sleeve tops, starting with the. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve head. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve cap height, measure shoulder point to armhole base, with back pattern takes 3 of 5 measure from 0 to down mark point. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve bicep line square out, and take measure from recorded or use formula. Take back and front bodies, armhole measurements, then divide by 2. Take back and front bodies, armhole measurements, then divide by 2. See the next. Then divide by 2 measure from 0 to armhole base point. And as you can see, I've created the make sleeve armhole line, take back and front bodies, armhole measurement. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve head. Then divide the biceps into 3 equal lines. First, rise up 0.75 inch, second rise up 0.38 inch. For the creative sleeve back armhole line, draw, curve, line, use, armhole, scale. 0.38 inch scop for the front armhole line if 0.38 inch rise up for the front armhole line. And you can see as I've create front armhole line US armhole scale. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve front armhole, 0.38 inch scope at under sleeve point, and draw curve shape by scale, this front armhole. And as you can see, I've created the sleeve hem, half and 0.38 inch seam allowance. Added an inch sleeve hem folding. And you can see as I've create sleeve hem allowance trun back point. completing the sleeve pattern and mark on 38" on seam allowance at sleeve inseam line. Cut the pattern. Thanks for watching, and next neck rib pattern making. Cut and remove the extra pattern from front sleeve armhole. Mark 0, 38" seam allowance. Mark grain line on sleeve pattern. One notch for front sleeve side. 2 notch. And as you can see, I've created the neck rib. Take the back and front neck measure, subtract 3", make a rectangle by 3" width, neck rib height 2", and hiding 0.75" seam allowance, mark grain line cut 1 piece, mark 0.38" seam margin both side on the neck pattern. Subtract 3". Make a rectangle by 3" width, neck rib height 2", and hiding 0.75" seam allowance, mark grain line cut 1 piece, mark 0.38" seam margin both side on the neck pattern. See the t-shirt pattern set, and next coming raglan t-shirt pattern draft.